So Tamron looks set to expand their lineup of Sony E-mount lenses with the introduction of 3 new primes and 1 new zoom lens that's going to fill out the Holy Trinity. Well, it's not quite the Holy Trinity, because the Holy Trinity goes from 16 up to 200, and Tamron's is going to go from 17 to 180. It's more like the Mini Trinity. So let's tackle the zoom first, and then we'll sort the primes out, because the zoom is the more interesting one for me. So it's a 70 to 180mm f2.8 that's going to perfectly fit in with the 28 to 75 and the 17 to 28 that we saw earlier this year. And if it's anything like this, or the 17 to 28, it's going to be pretty bloody decent and a damn sight cheaper than the Sony G Master lens. Now obviously it's going to fall short of that 200mm mark, only reaching 180mm, but honestly I don't think that's a huge issue when you factor in how small and light the lens appears to be. Based off the specs, it shares the same 67mm filter that is found on the 17 to 28 and the 28 to 75, so that's a pretty small opening to begin with. And based off the pictures we've seen, when the lens is fully retracted at its smallest size, it looks about the same size as this out of 75mm. Not particularly big for a versatile telephoto lens, to be fair. Not like the majority of 70 to 200s that we see on the market that are internal zooming, which means the barrel doesn't zoom down from that 200mm focal length. Now there are some advantages to internal zooming, but one of the biggest disadvantages of those 70 to 200s is the extra space that they take up when you're trying to pack it in your bag. I actually have the 70 to 200mm f4, and it's longer than this 70 to 180 looks like when it's packed down in a kit bag. And that's a stop slower as well. Now Tamron have stuck with the 67mm front filter, which is great for people who already own this lens and maybe the 70 to 200, because it means any filters they've already got for it will just transfer straight over. My concern with that, however, is that looking at the width of the rest of the barrel, it looks like they've expanded the barrel out closer to more like 72mm. So I wonder, is that front filter going to create a lot of additional vignetting that otherwise wouldn't be there? Have they had to sacrifice corner shading in order to keep the filter size at 67? The other trade-off they appear to have made is, while they're advertising a brand new linear autofocus motor that's supposed to be extremely quick, which would be great for a lens that could be used for sports and wildlife, the downside is that there's no mention of VC, or vibration compensation, or image stabilization, or whatever the bloody hell you want to call it. Now the fundamental question is, do you really need image stabilization in a 180mm lens? Arguably yes, for when you're hand holding a low shutter speed, but really the question is, are you going to be shooting at those low shutter speeds or not? I mean, honestly, whenever I've used the 70 to 200 f4, while a lot of the time I might have image stabilization turned on, I never actually need it. I'm generally at shutter speeds high enough that wouldn't really warrant any stabilization whatsoever. Now obviously a lot of the Sony cameras have IBIS in the camera, so adds some stabilization, but then let's be honest, the Sony IBIS isn't really the smoothest one around. Although that's probably less of a problem for shooting stills and more for shooting video. Overall, I imagine that if the 70 to 180 is basically an enlarged 28 to 75mm lens in terms of the build quality, the performance of it, and more importantly, the price compared to the competition, i.e. if the 180mm is no more expensive than the Sony G Series f4, then I think this lens is going to be a really popular hit with photographers. Now, onto the 3 prime lenses, and this is where things are a little bit more confusing, because the 3 prime lenses in question are a 20mm, a 24 and a 35mm, all f2.8. And the big question that I have seen everybody asking is, why the hell bother with an f2.8 prime lens? Especially if you already have the 17 to 28 and or the 28 to 75mm, you've already got those focal lengths covered at 2.8. Is there any real point in getting prime lenses? Well, arguably yes, because as we already know, prime lenses are smaller and lighter than the equivalent zoom lens, and they're generally better image quality as well because they're fine-tuned for that one specific focal length. So it could be you already have the 28 to 75 and you just want something that goes slightly wider, but you don't want to get the 17 to 28, so you could get just the 20 or the 24. Or alternatively, you might already have the 17-28 and want something that's a little bit longer, and you don't want to buy this 28-75, so you just get the 35 2.8 to go on the end of it. The 3 prime lenses also seem to have a few common advantages for them as well. The first is that they're all advertised as having a 1:2 reproduction ratio, so they're not going to be like brilliant macro lenses, but they at least will have pretty good close focusing capabilities. The second is weight. They're all advertised as weighing only 8 ounces, which is a damn sight lighter than one zoom lens. And then there's the price. They're all rumoured to be costing around about $350, which makes them about half the cost of the zoom lenses. However, I have some issues with these prime lenses. The first regarding the 24 and the 35. Now, granted, there's not really a direct competitor to the 20mm f2.8 currently on the market. The only 20mm full frame lenses that I can think of are the Sigma 20mm f1.4, which is granted 2 stops brighter, but it's huge and ridiculously expensive, or the Tokina 20mm f2, which is still a stop brighter than the Tamron, but is about double the price as well. So the 20mm could appeal to quite a few photographers, and there's not really a direct competitor. However, the 24 and 35 do have direct competitors from Samyang and also one from Zeiss as well. So you have the Zeiss 35mm f2.8 pancake lens, which we'll remove from the equation because it's quite a bit pricier than the Tamron. But Samyang also make a 24 and 35mm f2.8 pancake lenses, which are not only direct competitors to the Tamron lens, but the 24mm is only $50 more expensive, and the 35mm is actually cheaper than these Tamron lenses, and both of them weigh less than half what Tamron advertise. So unless these Tamron lenses blow them out the water in terms of image quality, they're not really anything particularly special. My other issue with these Tamron lenses is the size of them. I mean, they appear to be about that sort of size, which isn't particularly big, but it's a lot bigger than they actually need to be. Again, look at comparing them up to the Samyang lenses. The Samyang lenses are absolutely tiny. They look more like a lens cap than a lens, and the Tamrons look huge by comparison. But I can't understand why they're so big, especially when you look at the lens charts for them. The optics inside that lens only take up about the center quarter of the barrel. It seems to be more empty barrel than actual optics. It looks like Tamron have purposely oversized the lens barrels just so they can keep that 67mm front filter. And the stupid thing is, you don't need it. I mean, even the new Sony 35mm is smaller than that Tamron 35mm, and it's a stop and a third brighter, and it has a smaller filter thread as well. It's one thing downsizing the big lenses to keep a 67mm filter so you don't have to buy bigger filters, but having to then step down your 67mm filters to 55 or 52 or 49mm is hardly a big ordeal, is it? It just seems like Tamron are maybe a little too hell-bent on let's make everything 67mm front filters, even if it means destroying the image quality or just purposely oversizing lenses that they don't need to. But what do you guys make of these new lenses? Are you interested in these prime lenses, or are you looking at the alternatives? Leave your thoughts and comments in the box down below. Thank you so much for stopping by, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.